You are freezing. It is the kind of cold that doesn't just sit on the skin, it burrows into the marrow and refuses to leave. But the cold isn't what's killing you, it's the math. You are standing in the shadow of the St. Lambert's Church in the city of Münster. It is 1535. You look at your hands. The skin is translucent, draped like wet tissue paper over the knuckles. You haven't eaten bread in 3 months. Your body has entered the final stage of autolysis, self-digestion. Yesterday you watched your neighbour scrape the whitewash off the cellar wall to eat the lime just to feel something heavy in his stomach. He was dead by morning. His body is already gone. You don't ask where it went. In a city this hungry, meat is just data. Outside the city walls, the Prince Bishop's army is waiting. They are the hammer. Inside the walls, your king, Jan van Leiden, is the anvil. And you are the raw material caught in the crush. You look up toward the marketplace, you see the king pass by. He is wearing a vest made of pure gold foil, beaten so thin it ripples like water. He smells of roasted meat, heavy wine, and nutmeg. He tells you that this starvation is a test. He tells you that you are citizens of the New Jerusalem. He tells you that God is pleased with your hollow ribs. But there is something else here, a detail that everyone ignores because the horror is too loud. In the blacksmith's quarter, the fires are still burning hot, despite the lack of fuel. They aren't forging swords, they aren't forging armor. The king has ordered the smiths to forge 3 specific iron frames, not coffins, cages, rigid, vertical, unforgiving. The smiths are measuring them with calipers, not for storage, for fit. They are measuring them against the dimensions of a human torso. Why would a king who claims he is about to conquer the world need 3 iron cages designed to hold a rotting corpse upright? Hold that thought, because the answer isn't madness. It is the final, brutal calculation of a story written in blood. This wasn't a religious event, it was a psychological experiment. History likes to tell us that Jan van Leiden was crazy, that the Münster Rebellion was an explosion of religious hysteria, a chaotic fever dream of the 16th century. Refuse that explanation. Madness is a lazy word. It absolves the criminal of intent. It suggests that what happened here was an accident of biology. But when you look at the ledger of Münster, you don't see chaos. You see a blueprint. If you want to understand the cages hanging on that church tower today, you have to stop looking at Jan van Leiden as a lunatic and start looking at him as an architect of the human mind. Jan was not a warrior. He was a tailor. Do not think of a harmless old man hemming trousers. Think about the tool in his hand. A tailor is a man who takes the sharpest needle he can find and drives it through resistance. He understands that to make a garment fit, you have to cut the material, you have to sever the connections that don't serve you and stitch the ones that do. Jan understood that a lie is just like a coat. If you cut the fabric correctly, if you stitch the seam tight enough, the human eye can't see where the truth ends and the fabrication begins. He didn't come to Münster to preach. He came to measure the city for a straitjacket. In the 1530s, Germany was a broken landscape. The Reformation had cracked the foundation of the church. The poor were starving, the rich were terrified. People were desperate for structure. They didn't want freedom. They wanted certainty. Jan van Leiden didn't bring them religion. He brought them a pattern. He arrived in Münster not as a conqueror, but as an understudy to an older prophet, Jan Mathis. But when Mathis was killed, chopped to pieces outside the city walls in a failed miracle, Jan van Leiden didn't panic. He picked up the scissors. He ran to the marketplace, stripped naked, and fell into a trance. When he woke, he claimed he had spoken to God. The message was simple, brutal, and administratively perfect. Close the gates. No one leaves, no one enters. The world outside is dead. Münster is the only lifeboat in a drowning universe. This was the manufacturing moment. He took the fear of the people, the fear of the bishop's army outside, and he weaponized it. He turned the city into a pressure cooker, welded the lid shut, and turned up the heat. He wasn't crazy. He was efficiently consolidating his assets, and the primary asset was human belief. Now, we watch the machine go to work. To control a population of thousands while they starve to death, you cannot rely on charisma alone. You need a system. You need to re-engineer human nature. Jan van Leiden began by dismantling the concept of private. First, he abolished private property. All doors had to be left open. Privacy was reclassified as secrecy, and secrecy was reclassified as sin. All food was collected into central depots. If you owned nothing, you had to beg the king for everything. Hunger became the currency of loyalty. Then he targeted the biological unit of the family. This is where history books usually lose the plot. They giggle nervously about the polygamy in Münster. They talk about sexual excess and harems. They focus on the sin to distract you from the spreadsheet. Look at the ledger. The men were dying on the walls fighting the bishop. The male population was plummeting. The women were accumulating as surplus inventory in Jan's new economy. He didn't mandate polygamy for lust, he did it for logistics. It was a cold, hard audit of the city's resources. Every woman had to be attached to a man. Refusal was a capital offence. By forcing these marriages, he liquidated the old family units. A woman's loyalty could no longer be to her husband or her father, because those bonds were diluted, shared, shattered. Her only stable relationship was with the state, with the king. He nationalised the womb. He created a theatre of terror to enforce this. When one of his wives, Elizabeth Wandschurer, dared to criticise him, dared to suggest that maybe the king shouldn't be eating roast goose while the children ate grass, he didn't just have her killed, he turned her death into a public service announcement. He took her to the marketplace. He made the other wives watch. He played music. He knelt her down. And he personally decapitated her. Then he danced. This is the cognitive dissonance. To the outsider, this is a nightmare. To the insider, to the person trapped in the pressure cooker, this was justice. It was framed as a necessary purging of sin. The cruelty was the point. It was the glue holding the structure together. The terror was applied with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Every execution was a public lesson. The body is temporary. The king's will is eternal. While Jan was engineering the screaming soul inside the walls, the Prince Bishop was engineering the body outside, and the contrast was absolute. Inside the walls, frenzy, prophecies, drums, the manic energy of a cult burning through its own fuel. Outside the walls, silence. The bishop wasn't attacking. He wasn't throwing wave after wave of men against the stone. That is what amateurs do. The bishop simply stopped the clock. He built a ring of earthworks around the city, a perfect silent noose. He cut the water, he cut the grain, he sat in his tent, folded his hands and waited for the physics of starvation to do his work for him. He knew that courage has a calorie limit. By 1535, the city was a graveyard that hadn't realised it was dead yet. The forensic evidence of the starvation is nightmares made real. The people were boiling leather shoes to drink the tannin-soaked broth. They were eating the grease from candles. Rats were selling for gold coins. But the king's table was full. He had successfully engineered a reality where his gluttony was proof of his divinity, and your starvation was proof of your piety. He framed his obesity as a miracle. But all machines break. Entropy is the one law even a prophet cannot rewrite. June 25th, 1535. The siege breaks. The bishop's men find a weakness in the wall, betrayed by two escapees who traded the secret for their lives. The slaughter that followed was industrial. It wasn't a battle, it was a liquidation. The gutters of Münster ran with so much blood that the cobblestones were slick for weeks. The New Jerusalem was processed. The believers were hunted room by room, cellar by cellar, but the bishop didn't want Jan van Leiden dead, not yet. Death is too quick. A death is a release. The bishop needed to make a counter-argument. If Jan's argument was that he was a god, the bishop's argument had to be that Jan was meat. This brings us back to the blacksmiths. Those iron frames. Jan van Leiden, along with his lieutenants Knipperdolling and Krechting, were chained to a stake in the town square. They were not burned. Burning destroys the nerves too fast. The bishop wanted to maximize the duration of the signal. He brought out the hot tongs. These were pincers, heated until they glowed white hot. Imagine touching a hot stove. Your reflex pulls you back in a fraction of a second. The pain is a flash. Now imagine the reflex is chained down. Imagine the heat doesn't stop. The executioners were under strict orders. Do not kill them. Not yet. For 1 hour, 60 minutes, they tore the flesh from the bodies. They stripped the muscle from the bone. 5 minutes passed. 10. The smell of cooking pork filled the square. The same square where Jan had danced over his wife's body. 20 minutes. They cauterized the wounds as they made them to keep the blood inside, to keep the brain oxygenated, to keep them awake. 40 minutes. The king had to endure every single second of the clock. He had to feel his own divinity being peeled away strip by strip until there was nothing left but a screaming animal. And finally, the dagger to the heart. But here is the twist. Here is the answer to the mystery. Why the cages? The bishop knew that a martyr is dangerous. If you bury a prophet, his grave becomes a shrine. Pilgrims will come, they will take scoops of the dirt. If you burn him to ash, the wind carries his spirit to the next town. So, the bishop decided to suspend them between heaven and earth, rejected by both. The bodies of the three leaders were stuffed into those iron cages. The design, measured so carefully by those smiths, was specific. They were tight. They held the bodies upright. Even as the connective tissue rotted, even as the heads detached from the spines, the iron kept them standing. It was a broadcast signal. For 50 years, the bones remained there. For 50 years, the citizens of Münster had to look up every single day and see the rotting grimace of their false king staring down at them. It was the ultimate retention of power. Even in death, Jan van Leiden was watching them. 500 years have passed. Empires have risen and fallen. 2 world wars have swept across Germany. The borders of Europe have been redrawn a dozen times. But if you go to Münster today and you stand in the shadow of St. Lambert's church, look up. They are still there. 3 empty iron cages hanging from the steeple. The bones turned to dust centuries ago, but the iron remains. The city has debated taking them down. They say it's morbid. They say it's a blemish on a modern skyline. But they always decide to leave them up. Why? Because the cage isn't just a monument to Jan van Leiden. It is a monument to the psychology of the crowd. It is a forensic exhibit of our own nature. It is a reminder of how quickly you can become them. How quickly a tailor can become a god if the people are hungry enough. How quickly a neighbor can become a calorie source. The cages are empty, but the mechanism that built them is still running. The hunger for a savior, the willingness to trade freedom for certainty, the capacity to rationalize cruelty as engineering, that is all still here. We like to think we are evolved. We like to think we would never eat the whitewash off the walls for a man in a gold vest. The cages are hanging there to tell us that we are wrong. History is a ledger written in shadow. Most people refuse to read it. They want the light. But you are still here. You are watching the dark. The cages are empty. The mechanism is not. Every age builds its own version of Münster. Different walls, different prophets, same math. If you want to keep reading the ledger, if you want to understand how belief becomes infrastructure, then stay here. There are more entries.